Homage to the fundamental teacher Buddha Shakyamuni. Homage to the wisdom warrior Manjushri. Homage to all the benevolent lineage masters. With all of your kindness and love, let your wisdom's shining light clear the darkness of my ignorance once and for all. Grant me, I pray, the intelligence, the brilliance to understand the scriptures, both the word and the treatises. Until awakening, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. To accomplish the welfare of self and others, I give rise to bodhicitta. Sure?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we started off with this beautiful quote. For time, I won't go through it, but highly suggest revisiting this. Okay. So first, he goes over a bit of a summary of what we went over last lecture, the importance of 2 steps to transforming suffering, dropping the attitude of being entirely unwilling to suffer, as well as cultivating the attitude of being joyful when suffering arises. This lecture kind of goes into the details on how we can do that and steps towards that. And he discusses on this page how difficult it is to actually apply this. It's easy to talk about taking suffering and embracing it and being joyful about it, but in practice, it takes a lot of practice to actually get there, rather than just discussing it in theory. So he says it's really important to constantly contemplate and listen to teachings and think about Dharma practices to really allow this kind of realization to take root and to allow us to be able to turn our suffering into, to be able to transform our suffering. And he discusses the amount of effort it takes to actually reach this point in our mind, especially in difficult times. He discusses how it's not easy to accept and transform suffering. A really good quote on this one here. Right here we have, remember, it is not our problems that bring us down, rather it is our emotions that disrupt our peace of mind. And he discusses how it is detrimental to linger too much in the negative. Let's see here. He talks about how suppressing pain is not a sustainable strategy for coping with suffering, and how suffering is unavoidable because of karma and samsara. So once suffering has taken effect, we cannot always stop that from happening. A good comparison he does this to is having a flu and being very ill. Taking medication is only going to cause some relief. So in this case, if you had taken steps to prevent becoming ill in the first place, it would be more manageable. But while you're going through it, there's only so much you can do. The same way he compares karma while we're in samsara and suffering. But something important he points out is that if we've trained our mind regularly through practice, the negative impact of suffering will be far less. A really great quote in here that stood out for this page is, over the long run, not only can we come to embrace problems, but also to welcome them with delight. And then he discusses about how great masters would purposely put themselves in situations to allow for difficult circumstances or suffering to improve their practice through Chode, the method of cutting through the ego. He discusses the importance of persistence and continuous practice in really reaching that spiritual state where you can have this kind of mental strength to cope with suffering in the moment. He says that by the accumulation of our practice, our tolerance for suffering will gradually increase from a feeling of unbearable pain to welcoming it with open arms. And then he gives a really great quote from The Way of the Bodhisattva. But if depressed, I give up trying. How can I gain freedom from my abject state? If, however, I stand my ground with proud resolve, it will be hard for even great faults to attack me. He discusses that through mental strength gained through regular practice of Dharma and contemplation of the Dharma, enormous obstacles will no longer feel like a hindrance. Whereas on the other hand, if you do not have this practice, then small things can cause harm to yourself and others by merely not having that sort of mental strength to cope with suffering in the moment. And he discusses the importance of seeing suffering as an ally to help us on the path to develop joy when it arises. He discusses something discussed in The Way of the Bodhisattva. When sorrows fall upon the wise, their minds should be serene and undisturbed. He discusses how a wise man in the face of a difficult situation can remain undisturbed. However, this is not the same for what he calls the fool. And also Jigme Rinpoche and the Just King discuss this, and we discussed this in our first lecture, how the fool can remain obscured whether experiencing happiness or suffering. If you're easily overwhelmed by suffering or happiness, you'll never find the right time to practice. He discusses how there's an importance for diligent, consistent, and habitual practice, because if you're waiting for the right time, there will always be something that can get in the way, whether it is a good day or a bad day, whether it's suffering or just being distracted when you're in a good mood. That the importance for good practitioners is to diligently engage in practices under all circumstances, and not allow time to go to waste. Then he discusses the importance of finding a regular Dharma practice that matches the capacity of your mind, so that you can transform your negative circumstances and suffering. He compares this again to curing an illness. He says that if you take a certain medication regularly when illness strikes, then you have developed a good defense system. But he also talks about the importance of actually doing the practices, like taking the medicine. For example, if you talk about taking medicine instead of actually taking it, it's not going to have the same effect. By the same way, actually doing practice that will change your mind is very important to what we're learning here. He talks about how it is important to develop a training for your mind that resonates with your specific strength and capability, and to master that practice so that you can have that practice for good and bad times. And the importance of finding a practice that closely matches your mind. So first we talk about kind of picking out which practice that is. some people find it helpful to recollect on the three jewels. Some find Tonglen. The teacher discusses how he contemplates on impermanence when things happen. For example, if he's undergoing suffering, he thinks about how this is impermanent. When he saw the yaks from where he grew up that passed, he thought about the impermanence of that. And also when he went through the Cultural Revolution, he recalled impermanence as his go-to practice in these moments. And he discusses how experienced practitioners who are skilled on meditating, whether it's on impermanence, renunciation, or bodhicitta, when confronted with problems, rather than immediately feeling hopeless, they are even more likely to work through the problems with seriousness. Just do a quick time check. Okay. So he discusses a fire in his home village that took the life of 3 children, and how some of the nuns from that village returned to do funeral ceremonies and to help or guide the deceased to the Pure Land. And he discusses how they dealt with this difficult situation quite incredibly, and how the way that they were able to do this is through the repeated daily practice, which allowed them to have the mind to handle this situation differently than the average person would. He discusses how, these kind of wise words may not immediately take effect if someone is in great pain, but that regular contemplation of the teachings will allow you to be more resilient in situations, just like these nuns were in this difficult situation. And he discusses the importance of seeing practice as training. He compares it to a soldier in this passage. He discusses how, just like a soldier would learn how to do something instinctually, by practicing repeatedly, you will strengthen that ability in your mind. And that will improve your ability to transform suffering into enlightenment when you are tested in the moment. In this one, he gives a good example of how a happy practitioner who is very outspoken about Dharma in a good moment may find it challenging in a difficult moment to actually remain within that mindset. And the importance of, while it's easy to speak the theory of practice when you are happy, actually applying these practices when you are suffering is difficult and requires diligent practice. And then we start talking about using suffering to train in renunciation. He discusses how suffering in samsara is just the nature of samsara, and that you can think in the moment about reminding yourself that it is the nature of samsara, and that suffering is not necessarily unjust or unwarranted, that it is just the nature of samsaric rebirth. And then another strategy he discusses is recognizing that human beings' suffering is insignificant. He says to reflect upon suffering by recognizing the suffering of those in the lower realms, and that despite the sufferings of the human realm, be they sickness or other sorts of suffering, it does not compare to the hell realms, to the hungry ghost realm, or the sufferings of the animal realm. He says that by recognizing the suffering of other realms, we can see that our suffering is not the most unfortunate, and we can regain aspiration to achieve liberation from samsara through this recognition. Then we talk a bit about Milarepa's story. And Milarepa returned home after finishing his studies, found out that his mother had passed away and his sister was nowhere to be found. The average person would be overcome by suffering from such a dramatic change when you return home. But Milarepa made the intention to recognize that this is what samsara is, that sentient beings suffer, and that he should put his efforts into solitary Dharma practice. As a result of this, he was able to achieve liberation in one lifetime. So he discusses how suffering can inspire renunciation. And there's a great quote here from the words of my perfect teacher and the treasury of the Pith instructions. And so he discusses how suffering is, in the speaking translation, something I wrote down, he discussed how suffering is of great kindness to you because it can put you on the path of Dharma. The importance of recognizing that without suffering adversity, you would likely not step onto the Dharma path. In fact, he says that without hardship, very possibly we would never have the opportunity of awakening until the day we die, and we wouldn't learn the truth of samsara. So recognizing that this hardship can put us on the path and also can take us further down the path of awakening and finding the truth of samsara. Then we discuss about the innumerable suffering in samsara. There's a piece from the Parinirvana Sutra here where it states, in the three realms of samsara, nothing pleasurable can be found, but only the suffering of birth and aging and the defects of sickness and death. Being aware that suffering is inevitable, and in fact, there are many different kinds of suffering. The Yoga Karamuni Sutra, Shastra, sorry, nervous, okay, delineates 110 types of suffering, many different kinds of suffering, including the three primary pieces of suffering, the suffering of change, and the all-pervasive suffering of conditioning. We also, of course, have many other kinds of suffering, heat, starvation, thirst, birth, old age, sickness, death, among many else. And he discusses how having a strong and open mind that accepts suffering is important, and without that, we cannot possibly survive in the vast ocean of suffering that is samsara. He also discusses the Sutra of the Bodhisattva's primary conduct, which says, by taking the karmic body in the three realms, all are subject to suffering. As long as we were born in this world, we cannot separate ourselves into suffering, from suffering. And he discusses that suffering is inevitable for all sentient beings unless they achieve arhatship, pradayeka Buddhahood, or Buddhahood. Then he discusses how we have a tendency to see rich and powerful people and beautiful people and think that their lives are better and find envy. However, we cannot see into their mind, and we do not know what kind of life they're living. Since they are a part of samsara, everyone is suffering. And We just maybe cannot see the suffering they're going through in samsara. So in discussing suffering to train renunciation, he discusses how external factors are not the main cause of suffering. Instead, it is our mind. And that it is essential that we recognize the nature of suffering, the source of suffering, and the effect of suffering. That way, we will have the ability to confront pain even while we're experiencing it in the moment. He says that by embracing the fact that suffering is all pervasive, our anxiety will lessen, and that it's important while we're going through suffering to think, I should develop the capacity to endure all pain. He compares kind of going through life as similar to if you were to, say, end up in prison. He says that if you were expecting a great, wonderful, easy life in prison, then you will find it really unbearable. But if you are prepared for how tough the life will be, you will have an easier time navigating it. So he's comparing samsara to this. And then he discusses how we can recommit ourselves to the path of enlightenment with earnest renunciation, thinking of suffering as an opportunity to develop dharmic aspiration or recognize the suffering is fair because it is the nature of samsara and karma. Rather than getting caught up in feeling things are unfair, just recognize that this is part of karma, it's part of samsara, and refocus on staying on the path and being on the path of enlightenment with earnest renunciation. He discusses the importance of not turning from the three jewels, the Dharma, the Buddha, and the Sangha, even when you are in dire straits, dealing with a lot of fear and pain, and that it's important to develop a understanding of the quality of the three jewels. If you are struggling with this, he suggests to study the Sutra of the Recollection of the Noble Three Jewels, or also My Heart Advice and the Secret Pith Instructions to better understand the qualities of the three jewels. But he says it's important to not turn from the three jewels, take refuge in them, and by doing this, you will dispel suffering and have a stronger mind to cope with suffering. He discusses a bit more about how taking refuge will pacify suffering and bring peace, and also give you the strength to face obstacles and afflictions by taking refuge in the three jewels and also the Four Noble Truths. So you will gain that strength to cope with difficulties and afflictions. And then he discusses a great verse to recite if you are looking to take refuge. It is, I take refuge in the Guru, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. He says that when you are going through immense suffering, rather than falling to desperation, to instead take the chance to exert yourself in practice and taking refuge in the three jewels. Pray to the Guru and the three jewels with a sincere heart when suffering. And for this last bit, he discusses how people may not understand your faith, especially when you begin to take under some of these practices early on. He discusses how people thought it was odd and people turned from him at first. But as the changes of him undertaking the path came, he found that people were drawn to him again and curious. So even if people don't understand, a good quote he put here is, when our view is right and our conduct is in accord with that view, humans and non-human beings will venerate us with their support. However, if our views and conduct are improper, then all humans and non-human beings will turn away from us. Thus, taking refuge in the three jewels is the wisest decision one can ever make. So despite any setbacks, he suggests taking refuge in the three jewels and developing that mental strength to change suffering. And that.
So I do have a small question. So Khenpo offered several methods here to get yourself familiar with when you face the suffering. What would you choose?
So thus far, my friend who practices Buddhism and also one of our classes, I've been trying to think of situations. I think they mentioned to think of it as like a lesson to kind of learn. I've been trying to think that way. But I think this reading gave a lot more tools to and how to kind of view it. I quite like his recognition of impermanence. I think that is really an impactful kind of way of thinking when going through suffering. Because I think when you're suffering, it does feel quite, even it's not permanent. Of course, nothing is permanent. It feels quite permanent when you're in the emotions of it.
What is the most important point you get from this lecture?
Me or
yeah, you? I mean, all other people, but you first.
For me, I think the most important point was to recognize the nature of samsara and suffering. To recognize that it will happen and the importance of diligently practicing to have a strong mind when you're undergoing suffering.
Strong mind, great, like that. Okay, for the content of this text, this lesson, I'll give some of my own thoughts, share some of my own thoughts. I think Khenpo offered quite a bit, like when we face suffering, we not only like want to embrace it, knowing that it's inevitable, and also further, one step further, we want to take it like joyfully, like, okay, this is a great opportunity for our practice. And this is exactly the same way when some other people insult you or do something bad to you, you want to view that person as your great teacher, right? Because he presents the opportunity for you to practice patience, compassion, and all that. This is the same way when we face adversity or different suffering or the sufferings. So he also emphasized that we want to choose one method, choose a practice that matches the capacity of your mind. And he lists quite a few, contemplation on renunciation and recollect the transcendental qualities of the three jewels. My understanding this is that transcendent qualities, meaning like realize everything is an illusion, is empty in nature, recognize that and you just let it go. I may be wrong, maybe everybody have their own understanding. And then make a full prostration to destroy arrogance, because when we feel suffering a lot, most of the time, almost inevitably it's our ego and our arrogance in the way. So some other people find compassion and purification are mostly effective, or cultivation of compassion through tolerant practice, or think about the words of the guru, or just like practice the guru yoga, all that. Khenpo himself, he complained on impermanence. This is a great way. My personal experience with this impermanence recently, my sister's son died out of an accident. He was only 24 years old, really young and bright, has a bright future in front of him. And then, his life ends at 24 years old. So sometimes we always think young people don't die, but Chinese have a saying, on the road to the graveyard, there was no age difference, meaning everybody may die. We may die tomorrow, we don't know. So that is a really, but my sister, she studies, she does not do systematic study, but she knows under my influence, she goes to a little Buddhism, but not too much. And you can imagine her suffering at this moment. And she just say, I know there's nothing I can do, but just, I feel so, the heartache. Yeah, but still she did very well. She recited mantras and all that for her son. So, okay. And also, that strike a chord in me and says, words of wisdom might not take effect immediately for those who are in great pain. No, it does. It's some just like when this actually says when the effect is already taking place. Like we are already take the rebirth as a human being. So we cannot really transcend ourselves instantly into a celestial being, right? We or become an animal or whatever. So this is kind of in that effect has already matured. So we cannot immediately change that, but we can prevent but this also says when suffering already happened, it's difficult to really change this whatever already happened. But we can do something to prevent the future sufferings to happen, or we can turn our mind to relieve actually our own suffering, because suffering always is not the problem itself, but it's the mind, how the mind perceives it. Yeah, that's my few cents, 2 cents. I'll leave the chance either to the question or for other people to share their thoughts. Yes.
Your sister already practicing Buddhism before her son passed away, had the accident?
She makes some offerings to the temples, and she read the little sutras and do a little mantra, but she never really systematically studied it.
But now she started study or no?
She is still not quite into it.
Oh, okay. Oh.
I think I want to try to find a place for her to study, but it's not very optimistic in China. I know some groups, they have group study, but they don't want to take people from other cities. They only want to take local people.
Yeah.
I have some idea. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I know we have a few of us that's from the Chinese study sessions. if we go this way, it is important, or just as a tradition, that we find a kind of standard answer somewhere. So the questions were given to everyone a couple of days ahead. So hopefully everyone, after reading the test, listening to the video, audio, and then be able to find some of those answers somewhere. It could be short. It's always important. I know sometimes compared with a free discussion, it's kind of little serious and may even be boring. But over many years, I found that's very beneficial to everyone too. Like finding the correct / standard answer is important. Maybe if we can't, that's fine. But I think let's make majority of the discussion on finding those answers and talk around those answers. I think that will go one of the best way to benefit. But if not, we can have open discussion until we're used to that way. Is this good?
Okay, good. Let me repeat. So the Chinese class, we take such a format. So we go for the opening prayer, and then the person will have a host, and then we have a student to summarize the content of the text, and then we have questions like this for everybody to discuss. And then in the end, if we have time, we may go a little bit over other topics, but mostly we focus on the content of this text. All right, so this is the Chinese study format. So, okay, let's go back to our questions.
I think I just saw. I think the best example is in the text, Minerva, and because he's a great suffering, he killed so many people with the black magic, and he got so scared, and also himself suffer a lot, from his biography, his family, so that turned him into he turned his suffering into practice because he uh, uh, yeah, so he really suffered a lot, but he really used the suffering and really practiced hard, and in the end he reached the enlightenment. This I just saw from the text because I reviewed the text like 2 weeks ago, and then 2 weeks it was kind of wandering everywhere. I almost forgot what I read. Sorry, I couldn't share much. Oh, okay. How are you doing on this aspect? I think
Yeah.
I can share a little bit. Okay, on this. As a person, almost reached to 50, really understand what is suffering, and also all and also Sudaji Rinpoche in the teaching he gave a lot, and he had a surgery, and he had many criticisms. He received a lot of criticisms, and he was really using those as opportunity to practice. This is a great example for me because I have a lot of suffering as well, and when I see these examples, Yeah, I have I have a lot of suffering. Some of them I can transform with the practice, with the tone line, with the meditation, but still, like many times I fail. But that's the nature of samsara. You always have to keep going and to always practice, always remind you the wisdom from the text. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm really sorry. If whoever want to share, please.
It's all
I'll
great.
prepare
Thank
better
you.
next time.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else want to share on this? How are you doing when taking delight in approaching suffering?
I think it's super important that we realize the nature of the samsara. It is suffering. So when we realize that whatever happened, it's much easier to accept, right? And also depends on what happened. So like for myself, I think small things is easy when you use this method because you know, everything is impermanent. All this the Sodargye Khenpo teach us is very easy, but I always worry about if big thing happen. So that's why I think it's very important to practice more before any big thing happen, because I'm not that level yet. I cannot just turn everything, just think I can enjoy it or I can turn into on the path of enlightenment. That's my level right now. I just want to share this part.
Well, what are the big thing? Like
I don't know, maybe, wow, I'm always thinking, wow, maybe tomorrow I would die, you know, in the car crash or whatever, or if what happened to my family or whatever, have fire burn, you know, everything will happen in our life. So at my stage now, I'm not looking for it. That's what I try to say. But at the meantime, I think it's very important. We have to understand everything that Khenpo teach us, and because no matter what, I'm sure it will happen. Because like in the book, a lot of things is easy. For example, oh, it's too hot, it's too cold, I'm hungry, or somebody said bad thing to me, or I met bad people. That is very easy after we study and we just use the method. But if it's tragedy thing happen, I think we need to how to prevent, not prevent the thing happen, it's prevent myself how to deal with this thing, because it might happen, right? So I think it's very important, really practice a lot all this that Sodargye Khenpo taught us. Yeah.
Great. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I guess on my way back, I was just still listening to Zongsa Chinzhe Rinpoche. Everyone, I presume everyone is familiar with this example, like a sand castle. As a human being, as a person, we grow from like child, young age to adult, through the different phase of different age, our perspective, the way we perceive things change. Now, no more. Everyone in this classroom won't cry if somebody broke one of your toy, depending on what toy, right? If you have a Ferrari, somebody broke it, and then you may still want to cry or get angry. But like little things, sandcastle. But for a person, the way to grow is natural, just through time. But in order to grow or change that perspective, change that way we perceive things, the best way is through these studies, like what we're doing now. My personal experience is also the same. Of course, even at a certain age, there are things you care about, there are people you care about, and then there are things and people you don't. right? Some people care about their children, somebody care about parents, somebody care about grandparents or one of the grandparents. I can lose anyone, but not my grandma, and things like that. I think it was for me back to 10 years ago, maybe anything related to HR, and that's very important to me. Your title, your whatever. Anything that didn't meet your expectation, you could spend night or two, no good sleep, things like that. Of course, very much thanks to Khenpo and all these teachings, authentic teachings, and I definitely could see the change on myself. You get less and less, less concern, even if the same thing happened, or even the time that you get angry also can diminish, become shorter and shorter, and things like that. I guess the conclusion is these kind of study work the best for me, and I believe work for many of us too. Yeah, thanks.
Lower the hand. Okay. Just to maybe try to propose an answer based on the text as was suggested, because I think it's not a bad idea to see if we can sometimes find answers directly in the text. When I look at the question, I think the question in itself is revealing. So, why should a wise man take delight in approaching suffering as a favorable means on the path of enlightenment? So, to me, there are two elements here that I find interesting. First is a wise man, and second is why do they take delight in approaching suffering. So when I look at this, I'm thinking, okay, if I'm talking about a wise man, maybe I should first try to define what a wise man is. And then on page 91, 92, we have an answer, but especially I think it's good to start with the opposite of a wise man. So the opposite of a wise man is a fool. And then what is proposed as an answer by Khenpo, I will just type it in the text here. So I think that this is quite interesting. So the mind of the fool remains obscured, whether experiencing happiness or suffering. Such a person finds nothing to reflect on regardless of their experience and remains muddle-headed all day long, making no progress and reaping no benefit. The fool is easily overwhelmed by the fluctuations of suffering and happiness. There will never be the right time to embark on practice. This is because when you are happy, you are distracted by external things that bring you pleasure. And when you are anxious and suffering, you don't have the energy to focus on your practice. As a result, reacting to either happiness or suffering does not create a favorable condition to engage in Dharma practice. So when I look at this first, I'm asking myself, do I qualify as a fool? Or do I qualify as a wise? And then if I look at the definition of the wise, so the wise is this. In the face of a negative situation, the mind of a wise man remains undisturbed. So I think this is almost enough to disqualify me as a wise person, because I'm disturbed in the face of those kinds of situations. So I probably qualify much more as a fool than as a wise. But then it could be seen as a spectrum, maybe not totally fool, definitely not totally wise, but not totally fool. So I think it's an interesting way to first think at the question, and then I see somehow an answer in the text as well about the question of delight. So Khenpo Sodargye says that furthermore, he's talking about the wise man. The clarity of his mind will become even more pristine. When conditions are favorable, he does not become arrogant. When conditions are unfavorable, he learns more ways to practice and makes adversity an ally on the path. So a wise man should take delight in approaching suffering. It makes a lot of sense. So basically, suffering becomes a lesson for the wise, because the wise sees all opportunities as a way to improve. Why? Because the wise is not distracted by either pleasure or pain. The wise is able to remain in the present moment and has enough presence of mind to see things and use things on the path. So it is definitely a delight when you're at this kind of level, because everything that presents itself to you is a source of practice and a source of growth on the path. So that would be my attempt at answering the question from the text. I don't know if it qualifies as a sufficient answer, but something like this at least I would formulate.
Perfect. We consider this as the standard answer.
Just add a little bit. So whoever is hosting is supposed to find, or at least, right, give a little bit of summary on each, and by end of the discussion of one question, give some of this kind of standard answer. Let's say, make it short. That good?
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you
Just same as our Chinese sessions.
So for me, actually, I'm a person will be distressed easily if I am in too much pain. And if I am too happy, I will actually distracted so much. So for me, I cannot cultivate when I am too pain and or too happy. So if too happy, I will be lost very easily. So I hope that I will not be in my life. I will be not very happy all the time, because I will be lost. But also I don't want too much pain together come to me. So I'm not very brave. I hope that this pain should little by little, when I practice more, I will be very brave and I will be strong. So at that time, I hope the pain can be stronger. Then I think I will be stronger. Also, I can learn more. And also, for example, before when I in the life, when I have personally meet some life situation and get some pressure, I will use the, for example, I will practice the impermanence, use the impermanence to remind me that this pressure and the difficulties are only temporary and will not change over the time. So in this way, even the mistakes or things go wrong at work, I can use impermanent thinking to relieve my anxieties and maintain like a positive attitude towards life. This is before when I meet Buddha teaching before, but now now I learn more. So I practice this compassion, of course, and I learn Buddhist Tava. So after some practice, I feel my heart not always thinking myself. When I thinking on myself, only thinking on myself, I use impermanence to practice. But now, when I practice compassion, so when I meet some difficulties or I see some, for example, very poor animals or some poor people, I always thinking, if my kids, if have the situation like this, my heart will hurt. So I always thinking about that. So I don't want anybody be hurt. Even some people hurt me, I really don't want he or her be hurt. So I use this because my heart now larger than before. So now I can use the compassion to practice. But before I'm very selfish. So I cannot use compassion because some people, if hurt me so much, I very difficult for me to give the real wish, good wish to him. But now it's totally different. So from this, I think people in different stage should choose different ways to practice. This is very helpful. From our text, from our text also, there's some text mention about should choose a practice suits their own mind. So it can give you energy continuously. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good point. And glad to see you making progress from, the beginning and now the compassion and then that goal of self and going more towards others, but developing bodhicitta. All great.
Just to add a little bit of a background, she didn't say anything to me, but there's happened to be someone from the same city happened to live in my house. And then she shared a lot about how she was so diligent and organized. So we should congratulate on that. And
yes, thank you. We only have around
this is
10 people.
another way of being humble, but of course, good to see the progress.
From Khenpo too. Yeah. Thank you. You're encouraged.
So I think one way, so practicing is a way to actually opening our mind to bigger scope and to become more spacious, to embrace not just ourselves. Like we just focus on ourselves, and that is really narrow-minded, and we'll encounter numerous problems. And in the text also mentioned the human suffering is really insignificant comparing to sufferings from the hell realm and ghost realm. So if we really can be, our mind can be more open and we'll see in a bigger scope how the sufferings can be and how when. For example, I didn't say to my sister though, when she lost her son. So when people lose their most precious, loved people around them all the time, but why one person feel particularly sad when your loved one just lost because you are very focused on yourself. But if you see this happens every day around all these people, do you feel for these other people? So if we can do that, I think it not only relieve our own suffering, but also extend our compassion, just like that, right? So this is some of my own reasoning, my own thoughts. Okay. So I think
just maybe a comment on what you just said.
Yeah,
it's indeed the case that we like normally we feel much more affected by the suffering of people that we know directly than people who are maybe outside of our close circle. But I'm thinking, isn't it also not a bad thing? Because when you have an ordinary mind that is affected by circumstances, imagine if you would care as much for people you don't know than for people you know. Imagine how unbearable this would be, because it means that everybody's suffering around us would affect us as much as if it was the suffering of our own parent or our own child. So I'm thinking, in a way, maybe although this is not the ideal situation, and it just reflects the ordinary mind or the mind of the fool in a way, because ultimately we should have equanimity and then feel the suffering for everybody equally. When the mind is not prepared, this would probably be a devastating thing. And then I see from people around me who, for instance, watch the news a lot, and then they look at a lot of the things that happen in different parts of the world, and then they become extremely affected negatively emotionally by what's happening in the world. I don't know if it's a good thing. Like, it's not necessarily a good thing because their mind is not prepared to handle this suffering that is everywhere. So I don't know, it's just something that popped in my mind when you were talking about this. So I don't know if anyone has any agrees or disagrees with this.
That's an excellent point. I was just talking to another friend actually today, earlier today. So when this kicks in, this shows you great compassion. When you compassion, your emotion. So what we Mahayana Buddhism need to practice on is not only the compassion and this emotional, the feel suffering. We also need to have the wisdom, right? This is where the wisdom needs to kick in. So you need to review this as like a little bit more transcendent manner. Just, this is the illusion, this is empty in nature. I think that will be the right way. You need to walk with two legs. That's what it means. Like Mahayana Buddhism always emphasize compassion, which is bodhicitta, and emptiness, wisdom, right? So we need to develop equally on two sides. I would think. Now, of course, not always. When in the practice, there is always one side goes first. You need to move one leg first, but the other leg needs to follow up.
It's like developing compassion without wisdom, or developing wisdom without compassion. So that in both ways, that leads to a lot of trouble. Like, I guess we can imagine developing wisdom without compassion can lead to great tyranny. Because if you don't have any thought of others, then you can become very cold and extremely analytic, and then basically with no care for other people's suffering. And then the other way around would be maybe what I was talking about before. If you have a lot of compassion but no wisdom, then just compassion can just hurt you, like hit you.
Right.
And then you don't necessarily have the means to handle this great suffering that is everywhere.
Exactly.
Your conversation reminded me of the book Lin Yin by the COO of Facebook. What's her name? Sandberg, something Sandberg, I think. Sheryl Sandberg. So she wrote the book Lin Yin about 5 or 6 years ago, before the pandemic, definitely. It was the main theme was for women leaders to lean in fully to your work. And I totally agreed with the book at that time. But as I grew older, and also because of the pandemic, I reflected on it and realized I can't fully lean in to my work, to my career anymore. I have a full plate on my shoulder in my family life, and at the same time, Sheryl Sandberg also got some kind of attacks from other working moms about the idea of fully lean into your career. So now looking back, I feel it is a balance. Very hard for women in the working place. I can't be here fully devoted to the work and at the same time not sacrifice my family time or my presence with my children, with my mom, my husband. So it's a really hard balance for working mom to be successful, so-called successful in both places. And so when you have a lot going on, you see a lot of suffering around you, especially if they are your family, your close, your loved ones. It's really hard to say, okay, I'm going to devote myself to the practice, to the Buddhism study itself. So it's more like I'm practicing Buddhism in my work, in my family life, but I do have a priority that I have to choose one over the other. And sometimes I have to struggle between the two and kind of make a decision that this is my top priority right now at this moment. If this is my top priority right now, then I am going to be fully present with this task at hand. And for the next moment, I might have to switch, or my priority might change because everything is impermanent. So I have to accept the fact that I can't be permanently or like devote myself fully to a particular task for a long time. So basically, even during the day, so my mind has to switch between family and work. But at the same time, if you are really working for a mission or a goal that will best benefit all sentient being, then you will you are okay. I don't know if I'm making sense, but what I'm saying is, if your work is the same as your family, if the goal is to benefit all sentient being anyway, it's just which part of the sentient being is taking priority at a particular moment. Maybe that's what I'm saying.
There are, in Buddhism study, there are lots of skillful means, like making aspiration, for example, right? Waking up, making aspiration. I do everything today, including work, chores, whatever, for the liberation of sentient beings. Maybe, again, when making these big, like all the sentient beings thing, is sometimes pretty vague. I think it is also okay to make a little bit more specific or particular. Sometimes you do this tonglen for mother, for friends, that's okay. But doing for the enemy, somebody really hurts you, it's hard. So depending where you are, make some aspiration. Of course, making an aspiration to liberate all sentient beings is always good. And make that aspiration, do whatever you do, you need to do. Those are all accumulation of merits, and maybe also wisdom also. I think these are one of the skillful means. When given some time, we may find things are changed. You'll be able to even focus more, spend more time for the specific study. Yeah, things like that. So.
All right. So just I think everybody think about practicing the practice matching the capacity of one's mind, and it may change with your practice. And once you truly realize a little bit illusory physical world, you may be able to use that kind of method. But before that, you can always use whatever impermanence, meditation, compassion, everything. So it may not be one method forever. It may change. Just know your own capacity and choose what works for you at the time.
Okay. Well, samsara, the nature, yeah, definitely is suffering. But myself is most of my friends look at me kind of optimistic person. So so in my life, in my job, I just retired last year. I own a dental clinic, so I have a lot of dentists from all over the countries. Super difficult dentists because they all very difficult to control. But because my personality was like, okay, so today I have a problem, so I conquer the problem, then everything is fine, everything's perfect. It's been, I've been studying Buddhist for a long time, but I was kind of like really just very surface to go through it. It's not, well, only until I retire, I have time really go into it. Then I found out myself, it was so stupid. That's the feeling I had. Like I was so stupid. I think, okay, whatever happened, as long as I make an effort, I conquer it, then everything goes on, everything's perfect, everything's good. And just like a lot of people think, my life is, yeah, we know impermanent, but in our mind, I still think, oh, I still have good life today. I can live for many years. I can own this for many years. So sometimes I feel when my personality is optimistic and misleading myself. So I was for many years, I didn't really feeling that samsara, the nature is suffering. I really didn't see it. But when I put more time to study, then my first reaction is like I was so stupid. That's how I feel. So when I realized that, then of course I want to get out of the samsara. So how I use it as a way for renunciation, right? Yeah, I think just through the study, I know suffering is from karma, from the ignorance. It's not something we can always can avoid, but definitely it's so important for me to understand this is the nature, and to more really understand everything is impermanent. So all I want is I want to get out from the samsara. That's all I can say.
So what made you realize that samsara is suffering in nature?
Well, that's what I got from the teaching. Everything you have it, all the money you earn will disappear. All the building is so tall, they will crash. Like whatever you have. Oh, and this is when I realized that, then I decided to get retired. So, so it's last October, I just found out, I'm still, almost 50 at that time. And if I continue inside the samsara, just try to earn more money as everybody think is good. And at that time, I have two big, huge dental clinic. I have 16 dentists. It seems good, right? It looks good. And I started from nothing and then build up my empire. So when I decided, I said, no, I'm going to sell everything. I'm going to get retired. I'm going to study Buddhist. It just last year, October. And all my friends, whatever, they just like, why? You have such a big empire. You've been working hard. I work so hard, to be honest. I've been working hard for the past, how many years? 14 years. I started from, because I'm not a dentist and I'm an immigrant here in Canada, right? So I have to start it from zero, from know nothing about dental clinic and build up. Well, at least I make it become the biggest dental clinic, one of the biggest dental clinic in Montreal. So I've been suffering a lot in my career. I have to went through mafia people threaten, because in my first clinic is in the Italian area. It's a lot of mafia guy there. So the mafia guy would just walk in my clinic, said this belong to me. And I have to go through, I'm not a chef. I'm not a dentist. I have to go through the no dentist. I have to go through all the marketing. I have to go through like everything. So I'm just talking about the career thing. So it is a lot of suffering, but my biggest suffering is I didn't realize it's suffering in samsara. I just always think, okay, I wake up, I solve the problem, I continue, and beautiful tomorrow will keep coming. Yeah. Then I'm really happy that I slow down a little bit, because my body, my mental, everything, I'm so tired. And then when I realized this truth, and then I said, that's it. I won't be so stupid anymore. I'm getting out. So in 1 month, I decided just sell the clinic and sell
Wow.
everything. And then, so that's part of my life. And so I don't know.
It's amazing. You are
My
amazing.
part of my life, does it make any sense?
You are an amazing woman.
Can I make a quick comment here?
Maybe I'll wake up too late, I don't know, maybe I will die tomorrow. But it really, it clicked when I study cause and effect, it clicked in my head. I'm just like, what am I doing here? So I just decided, when I start, I still healthy. I don't know, tomorrow I'm not healthy anymore. I just want to take my, my chance on my last breath to study Buddhist. Yeah, that's how I understand samsara right now. And I want to get out from it. Yeah.
I think that's a perfect explanation or answer to this question. I believe the question here is not only suffering, because suffering is easier. Remember last time we were sharing Zhongsai Rinpoche's word. Everyone want to get, renounce or, rid of the suffering, but not many want to get rid of the happiness. However, by nature here, why the inherent nature of samsara is suffering, because those kind of happiness is suffering too, or they are the cause of the suffering, or we can say it's suffering already in the same time. Maybe, okay, after I build this empire, all this success, things will be good. But when you really have finished that, you found, okay, this is at the cost of that, and those are the cost of those, which usually much bigger than what you get. I think that's one of the reasons we say that the samsara is suffering in nature. Again, when using suffering as a way of renunciation, also, I believe I can see that Lily did a good job also, because when you just see the change of the body conditions, honestly, given maybe 100 people, maybe there's only one or two can realize, will connect this to the renunciation. Others, okay, I'll find a doctor, fix this body, make it a new car again, and then I will start over, right? That's the 99 chance of people. But using this as a renunciation or the alarm is a kind of a wisdom also, or this a blessing of the of our masters too. Yeah, just my comment on this. Thanks.
I want to applaud for your realization and also for your reflection about what happened in your life. I kind of went through the same thing as you. I was the head of statistical programming for a small startup company for 3 years until last year. The company kind of collapsed and everyone was let go, and I was happily kind of removed from the samsara of working. So since then, I was lucky enough to met and many other teachers in life, and studied Buddhism and studied Ashtanga yoga, which by itself is a branch of Buddhism, I would say. So did a lot of reflection and a lot of learning about philosophy, actually. And sometimes it's philosophy, sometimes it is psychology, sometimes it is even human body, anatomy stuff. So made me realize a lot of things about my own habit and my own kind of like 习气. Like even at Ashtanga yoga, I want to be the best yogi. I want to do this and I want to do that, which made me realize, okay, so that is my innate or almost like my own karma. It could also be my own, because of my own upbringing from the 70s in China. So anyway, that's the experience I share with you in common. And right now, I'm thinking how to use suffering as a way for renunciation is actually to be able to realize this, but use our strength for the work we are passionate about. Yeah, that's the way to kind of transfer suffering into positive work that benefit all sentient beings. So use the suffering to train in taking refuge. So firstly, let's define what does taking refuge mean. Yeah, at the very beginning, I thought taking refuge means I have to choose my guru. I have to choose a religion. I have to choose a faith in order to say I am a Buddhist, I am a Ashtanga yogi, or whatever label you have. But now I feel it's just faith, trust in the process. So I have faith in the future. I think I am still hopeful for the future of a human being. And we are undergoing a lot of hardship right now in the world. There are war and there are environmental problems and global warming and all the disasters going on in the world. And a lot of suffering are manifesting themselves. But
So
yeah.
what would be human beings' refuge for that?
I think it starts within ourselves first. So we have to have peace with ourselves. If everyone in the world have peace inside, then we have a peaceful world. And then expanding on that idea, if within your family you have peace and joy, each family is a happy and peaceful family. And even going wider, if each country, each Sangha or each country has peace with them within the country. And
let me ask you, have you taken refuge in Buddhism?
yes.
So you took refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the Sangha.
Yeah.
So that is what taking refuge means, right?
At that time, yeah.
At that time, how about now?
Yeah, and after a while, since this years of study, and I don't think a particular teacher is the taking refuge mean.
How about the Buddha?
Who is Buddha?
Good question. When you're taking refuge in the Buddha, who is the Buddha?
Yeah, at that time.
Very good question.
Yeah, at the time when I was taking refuge, having the ceremony of the taking refuge, at that time, Buddha was an image of Shakyamuni. And over this past year and a half, it has changed. It has become a group of teachers who are currently living, plus many people who have written books, have created teachings in the past. It could be someone who has long gone, like an ancient master, like Confucius or Zhuangzi or whoever, or even ancient Greek philosophers. So in general, so my idea of Buddha has changed, and eventually
I think is the Buddha is within each one of us, and that's when I realized the Buddha nature, what it means to have a Buddha nature within each one of us. And it has been kind of hidden because of our education or upbringing or environment when we grow up. So in short, so the Buddha right now is everyone inside, our nature of our Buddha nature inside.
So
Yeah.
by definition, let me recite. If I remember, not word to word. By definition of taking refuge in the Buddha, that means you are not going to seek refuge from any other non-Buddhist teachers. This is the definition of taking refuge in the Buddha. So I'm not quite sure.
Let's okay. Anything in this Buddhism, let's say minimum or traditionally have 4 levels of meanings. There is outer, inner, secret, and extreme secret. I think when doing the extreme secret, when we're talking Buddha nature of oneself, we just taking refuge to ourselves. However, to beginners, if we say let's take refuge to ourselves,
it wouldn't work.
That doesn't sound like to many people that were good, right? You have to go to a certain school, starting a certain kindergarten and things like that. That's why when we take refuge, is taking refuge, and also that's why there's those like restrictions, right? You take this to the Buddha, you don't take refuge to any other whatever masters. However, this also may sound like a very Christianity or many other religions, right? So don't misunderstand. But again, to begin with, it is good just to take refuge with the Buddha or with the guru that you have confidence with. I think again, let's say this is the outer, right? And then you go more inside, and then you understand what is real mind, what is truth or reality. However, realization, whatever term that you use, again, that's the true nature or Buddha nature. Buddha nature, to many people, if you talk Buddha nature today, people may think there's some kind of physical thing in our head. That's the Buddha nature, right? Maybe there's a pole somewhere in the body. So again, depending the level that we study, and then we use different kind of refuge too.
Just a tiny little thing that I would like to add to this, because this is actually, in a way, one of the easiest thing to do, and at the same time one of the hardest things to do in Buddhism. So it's very easy to take refuge and then or get like a ritual in which you take refuge and okay, I have officially taken refuge. What does that mean? Probably about nothing, or that doesn't mean much, because actually some people use the term taking refuge, but there are other translations which is to go for refuge. And I think that going for refuge is a more appropriate way of talking about the relationship we have with refuge than taking refuge, because going for refuge means going in a direction where the refuge is. And then at the beginning, being in the refuge is not there. We say it in our minds, it's something that we can say out loud, but feeling it inside deeply that, yes, I see that in the Buddha or in the Buddha's teachings and in the masters that I follow, all the answers are there. And ultimately, I realized that all the answers are there because they're all already inside of me. But this is a process that takes a long, long time to, or I guess for some people it can be faster. But if I just take my case, it's something that I feel that is growing. But to say that I took refuge, no. But I'm going in the direction of taking refuge. And then the more I look at myself, the more I look at my mind, the more I look at the outside external environment, the more I see that there is no other place to take refuge. Because there is nothing within samsara that can be the solution to samsara. The solution has to be from a source that is not polluted by samsara. So this is this idea of refuge. So we go for refuge in a sense that more and more we practice, the more and more we study, we contemplate and meditate, the more and more we start to understand that indeed the answers to the questions reside there. So eventually it can become the true source of refuge. And when it will be the true refuge, is because we will have all the answers and then we will be enlightened. And then as Khenpo says at some point, I don't know if I will find it again, but where is it? I wrote it down somewhere, sorry. When our view is right and our conduct is in accord with that view, humans and non-human beings will venerate us with their support. So this is a form of manifestation that the refuge is actually really starting to take place. And eventually, we will become a source of refuge for other living beings, because that refuge will be solidly in place in who we are and how we see the world and how we conduct ourselves through body, speech, and mind. At least that's my understanding. This is a very, very profound topic, the notion of refuge, and it requires a lot of work and years and years and years and maybe lifetimes after lifetimes after lifetimes to eventually get to that perfect level of refuge. But this is very important topic.
Ultimately, when we take refuge to the Buddha nature in ourselves. But for the beginners, when the teacher actually gives the refuge vows, there is a specific requirement. So just know your own practice level, so you can be accurately kind of place yourself in that place. So dedication, just as all the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas dedicate merit. So likewise, I also dedicate all merit to the cause of enlightenment of all sentient beings. By this accumulation of merit, may I obtain all seeing omniscience, and may all faults be defeated. The whirling turbulent waves of birth, aging, sickness, and death. From this ocean of samsara, may I liberate beings. Just as the Bodhisattva Manjushri attained omniscience, and Samantabhaja too. All these merits now are dedicated to train and follow in the footsteps. As all the victorious Buddhas of past, present, and future praise dedication as supreme, so now I dedicate all these roots of virtue for all beings to perfect good actions. Om Ahom Banza Guru Bama Sada Hom. Om Ahom Banza Guru Bama Sada Hom. Om Ahom Banza Guru Bama Sada Hom.